This is Robert Stearns. Hey, I want to thank you for tuning in. I really believe that learning is one of the greatest joys in life. And one of the greatest ways to learn is simply to have meaningful conversations, both with those who come from a similar background as yours, as well as those whose background might be very different. So my hope is that as we connect and converse with leaders from all around the world, that we will learn and grow together. If you're new with us, hit the subscribe button and we'll deliver the new episodes to you right away. So wherever you are, on a run, in the car, at the kitchen table with some coffee, welcome to the conversation. Hey, everybody. God bless you. Welcome to another edition of Bishop and the Rabbi. All of you folks who love studying the Bible, love learning about the land of Israel, love learning about the Jewish roots of the Christian faith, and you find meaning, you find joy in coming alongside and studying this ancient text that still speaks to our hearts and our lives today. So good to have everybody here. Please sign in. You guys know the drill. Week after week, Thursday nights, we are here. Sign in, fill in on the chat section, use that. And let's welcome folks from all around the world. We're going to have an incredible night tonight. An amazing guest that I'll introduce in just a moment. But come on in and sign on in. A few quick announcements while people are, there we go. All right, there's your comments coming in. New Jersey is in the room. Baltimore, Maryland is here. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. There we are. We're coming on in. Come on in, everybody. Sign in. Tell us who you are, where you're watching from. It's great to have us here. And you have one job. You have one job. You know what your job is. Hit the share button. You have one job tonight. Hit the share button. Let us grow this global movement of Jerusalem-based Christianity, of Christianity that is committed to walking out the faith of Jesus. We have recognized and understood that a post-Constantinian Christianity looks radically different than what Jesus and his initial followers understood. And so we are endeavoring to understand, what did New Testament Christianity, what did it mean to be a New Testament follower of the teachings of Jesus? And that is what we step into as we weekly study the Torah with amazing rabbis from all over America and some around the world. That doesn't mean that we have total theological agreement with all of our guests. Folks, I don't have theological agreement with myself half the time. That is the power of a journey of faith. We grow, we encounter the living God, we encounter all of the depth of the meaning of what it means to study out the Word of God. And so we're excited to be here tonight. Hit the share button for us. A few quick announcements. Number one, you are invited to Torah Tuesdays at 12. Every Tuesday at 12 noon, we study the Torah with Mark Gerson. We just had an incredible class a couple days ago. We had about 125 folks on from 7 different nations. This is a free class, but we do ask you to register to be a part of it, just so we can keep, really the sanctity of the room. We can keep a sense of people who are serious about this. So join us for Torah Tuesdays at 12. It is amazing. We are currently in the book of Genesis. It's been illuminating. It's been invigorating. Also, we are able to do everything that we do because we have an incredible team of partners who come alongside this ministry and keep us moving. And many of you have been partnering with this ministry 20 years, 25 years. Guys, how blessed are we? There's been 2,000 years of division between Jesus' biological family, the Jewish people, and Christians. And in our generation, we have witnessed the rebirth of the state of Israel. We have witnessed the regathering of the exiles from the 4 corners of the earth, most notably the Soviet Union, but all over the world. We've witnessed the reunification of Jerusalem. We've witnessed the affirmation of that reunification by the American embassy moving to Israel, and now several other embassies moving. We've witnessed Arab states signing peace treaties with Israel. Beloved, this would have been unheard of a decade ago. Nobody could have imagined this a decade ago. It's happening right in front of our eyes, and we are witnessing Jews and Christians coming together to study the Word of God. This is a sacred moment. This is a holy moment. Would you join me and help partner with me as we together help this happen? And finally, just before we start with our esteemed guest tonight, honestly, we are beyond honored with our guest tonight. But help us feed those in Israel who are in need, especially in an hour of COVID. You know that Eagle's Wings runs 2 feeding centers. We run a feeding center in Jerusalem. It is right near the downtown central bus station, right across the street from the United Hatzalah headquarters. We are open there 6 days a week. Many of you have been with me to the feeding centers. And then our second feeding center in Tiberias, just across the street from the Leonardo Hotel, right on the Sea of Galilee. And we are feeding hundreds of people every single week through our commitment to Abraham's Bread that we run in partnership with Mayor Panim there in Israel. So make a decision, feed a family, go right now to eagleswings.org/donate and do something practical tonight to bless the Jewish people. The Bible says, Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless you. Let's come into a covenant of appreciation, a covenant of honor, of respect, of mutuality with our Jewish brothers and sisters, not changing our beliefs to come to the table, nor requiring them to change theirs, but in a place of mutual dialogue and mutual respect, journeying together on this Psalm 24 journey. Who may ascend the hill of the Lord? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. We want to ascend into the knowledge of God as we study his word. And, I almost forgot, but I didn't forget. And as we go to Israel, we're going back to Israel. I'm telling you what, it's been the hardest year of my life. This is the first year since 2020 was the first year since 1994 that I have not been in Israel. Usually I'm there 4, 5, 6 times a year. But we are going back. We want you to come September the 27th to October the 8th. Join us on our Awake Jerusalem tour. And all of the information is there. This is your year to be in Jerusalem. Come with us. It's going to be an amazing time. All right, folks, we are amazingly blessed to have with us tonight a dear friend. I've had the privilege of knowing him for several years through our work with the Israel Christian Nexus. And he is indeed one of the leading rabbis, not only in our nation, but in our world. Before we bring him on, let me let you know, Rabbi David Wolpe is the senior rabbi of Sinai Temple in Los Angeles. Newsweek magazine named him the most influential rabbi in America and named by the Jerusalem Post as one of the 50 most influential Jews in the world today. His accolades go on and on. He's been featured in all of the major media outlets. He has done teaching on PBS, A&E, the History Channel, the Discovery Channel. He's a best-selling author, and I especially want you to get 2 of his books. His most recent book on King David is called David the Divided Heart. David the Divided Heart. And then another amazing book, The Case for Faith, that is just incredible. He has been a shining light in the midst of so many areas, and we're so honored to have him with us tonight. Give a huge welcome to our friend, Rabbi David Wolpe. Rabbi, God bless you, sir. Welcome from Los Angeles.
God bless you. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you're going back to Israel this year. I'm sure for me too, it was such a hard year to not be there. And thank God we are coming. We're coming. It's not going to end, but we're coming to an end. And we're once again open the gates for us to be able to go. So that is a wonderful thing. I'm glad to be sharing it with you.
Absolutely. And, Rabbi, another interesting connection we've had over the years is that we've also, we've been together in LA several times. You've been so kind and you've spoken at different of our Eagle's Wings, Israel Christian Nexus events out there. But you and I also run into each other sometimes in Washington when we do the very important work, with AIPAC and other organizations of keeping the strong Israel Christian, I'm sorry, the strong Israel American alliance linked together. And I was heartened, even in this moment of political acrimony and vitriol, I was heartened to see 97 U.S. senators affirm that the embassy is staying in Jerusalem. And I thought, well, that was great news.
I thought it was wonderful news.
How important is that, Rabbi, for us right now?
It's so important I mean, as you mentioned at the beginning very kindly, I wrote a book about King David. So since King David, it has been the capital of our people. And I was so moved and grateful that our nation now acknowledges that and that there'll be no backsliding about it. And there shouldn't be. And what we have discovered is, and this is no surprise to you, if you take a firm stand and say, I deeply believe this, what happens is that people in the world say, okay, all right, that's okay. There wasn't this giant upheaval. There wasn't a huge backlash. In fact, what happened was the world is increasingly affirming what you and I both know, which is that Jerusalem is the eternal, undivided capital of Israel. So.
Yeah. Well, and I had the unique privilege and responsibility, after President Trump was elected, and yet before he was inaugurated, the New York Times ran opposing op-eds, one pro, one against moving the embassy, and I had the privilege of being asked by the Times to write the op-ed supporting the move of the embassy. And as I published that in the New York Times, I mean, again, just was excoriated. I'm calling for World War III. There's going to be blood in the streets.
Right.
And we saw the opposite. We saw a normalization of relationship with those genuinely moderate Arab Muslim nations who are really looking for modernity, looking for civility, and looking for peace.
It reminded me of what Harry Truman once sort of offhandedly said. He said, sometimes you have to put your principles aside and just do what's right. And I think here, people had all these principles, and they just had to put them aside and actually do what was right, and the world acknowledged it. So, yes.
That's good. That's good. Well, Rabbi, we want to learn from you tonight. We're honored, and we're so excited to learn from you tonight. Everybody wants you to go. Well, follow Rabbi Wolpe on Twitter at Rabbi Wolpe at Twitter. We'll put his handle in the comments. Follow him. Go to Temple Sinai and sign up for everything that he's doing. Get his books. But Rabbi, we are tonight Exodus chapter 25 through Exodus chapter 27. Taruma or Taruma, depending on if you're from the south or the north. But this is a very interesting time. Israel we've been at the summit of Mount Sinai. We're having this Sinai moment. And God says to Moshe, Hashem says to Moshe, my people shall make for me a sanctuary, and I shall dwell in the midst of them. Now, there, that's an amazing concept, the concept of the eternal one, of the divine essence, the divine presence coming and dwelling in the midst of a people, that we would be a holy nation, a royal priesthood, a dwelling place for God. And then God begins to lay out these very practical things because there's a physicality to it, right? There's a physicality. We're gonna see the physicality of that. But Rabbi, this is thousands of years ago. Yeah. This is a desert nomadic tribe. They're talking about the divine essence, living in their midst. Unpack for us. Tell us, what does this Parsha speak to us and to our world today?
So there are so many things, but I want to highlight 3 points about it. And they actually all occur in that first paragraph that you made mention of. The first one, which is the most difficult, rich, interesting one in a sense, is the idea that God, who is beyond human conception, can somehow be in a place. And this notion, I want to introduce to your listeners the Hebrew word tzimtzum, which means contraction. And the Jewish mystics spoke about the idea that God actually willingly contracts, not in real space, because God doesn't have space the way you do and I do, but that God makes room for people. And God makes room for people in all sorts of ways so that we can act the way we want, so that we have free will, so that, because it's almost like if every place is God, where's there space for us? And the idea that you would make a sanctuary and God would dwell among you is an idea also that God is saying, okay, here is the space for which you can make the sanctuary, because there's a partnership here. I don't do everything. I don't take up every bit of the world. And so you have to take the initiative as well. And that idea, the idea of God's self-contraction, of tzimtzum, is a really powerful idea that I think anybody who's a parent knows that this idea, right? When the kid is very little, you're constantly there. You're all over them. You're helping them with everything. But gradually, you have to contract and give them space and give them freedom. And I believe God does that. I'll tell you one quick Hasidic story about a man who came to the founder of the Hasidic movement, the Baal Shem Tov. And he said, when I was young, I felt very close to God, but now I feel far away. And the Baal Shem Tov said, of course, because when you have a child who's learning to walk, you hold their hand and you're right there. But in order that they can walk better, you have to move further and further away and let them walk to you. And that's what God is waiting for now in your life, is for you to walk to God. And that idea of tzimtzum, I think, allows us to see that.
Wow. And give us the, is that like a tzimtzum? Like tzitzit?
Like a TS.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
right, it's a tzadi. Exactly. Tzimtzum. And it is, and the medieval mystics, especially a rabbi named Luria, whose grave you can see if you go to Tzfat in Israel, he made this a very powerful concept in the Jewish tradition. And the more you think about it, the more you can see different ways in which it can play into your life and into your idea of both God and also of just the way we deal with each other. The second part of this is the very beginning, which is Truma. That's just, it's about giving. So much of what we say is, it's one of those things that is a cliche because it's so true. I know over the years, and I suspect this is true for you too, when someone comes to me and says, I'm depressed, give me some advice. My first piece of advice is go to a soup kitchen. Feeding someone else is a better cure for depression than anything you can do for yourself. And this, God telling people to give, it's not for God, but God telling people to give is a way of activating that part of ourselves that elevates us and allows us. I mean, the story is that they, at a certain point, Moshe had to say, okay, we have enough. Thank you. That should happen to us one day. And we say, okay, it's enough already. But that notion of being able to give even in difficult times is really, there is in fact in the medieval code of Jewish law called the Shulchan Aruch, it says, if you're a beggar and you get money, your first obligation is to take a little bit of that and give it to somebody who's less fortunate than you. Because it is empowering for everyone to know they can give, even if they don't feel like they have much.
Yeah. I mean, Rabbi, you're touching on things right now. And again, as you say, this is one of those things it's so obvious, and yet in its obviousness can't be lost. I mean, Jesus said it is more blessed to give than to receive. Yes. And we have all kinds of examples from the Christian scriptures on the importance of giving. And it really boils down to, I think, in today's consumeristic world. I mean, I sit there with my 3 sons and I am constantly saying, guys, life is not found in the accrual of stuff and the latest technology and the best sneakers and all of that. Our humanity is redeemed and affirmed and expressed in the ability to be a blessing to someone else, to without agenda and without expectation of return, to simply be that force, that release of good in the world. And And I think this is more important than ever in a culture that, to me, and I don't mean to be one of these, like
Right.
depressing people who just rails against culture, but we're living in a moment of cultural narcissism, that there is such a self-centeredness. People are just so wrapped up in the self, and corresponding with that, this sense of, if I just had more, if I could just acquire more. But the human soul is not about, it doesn't find ultimate joy in self-centeredness or in accrual, but in being other-centered and in giving. And that's what Judaism is saying to us right here.
Exactly so. And it's that beautiful story, not from my tradition, um, of Mother Teresa, that I have heard, that when she was, feeding lepers in Calcutta, and an American journalist was watching her and said, "Oh my God, I wouldn't do that for $1 million." Mother Teresa said, "Neither would I." And that
Right.
reality, that if she did it for $1 million, it wouldn't mean anything to her. The point was
Right.
precisely that she wasn't doing it for that. She was doing it for the reason that you just so beautifully expressed, which is the fullness of your humanity and your connection to that which is greater than yourself. So that
And
also,
in a sense, redeeming that image of God that we're given in the garden, because
yep,
God is the God who gives. I mean,
yep,
God is a giver. Every
yes,
good gift comes from God. And so that's a way that we participate in that image of God, that divine essence that he's given to each human being, is to cultivate within us and that is why, and I do not mean this to be a commercial, but that is why I love what we do with Abraham's bread. I mean,
yeah,
my kids have grown up every single year we go to the soup kitchen and they go back to the kitchen and they start peeling potatoes and peeling carrots. And they're going to have that memory, of just constantly being there and in that place. And I just want to challenge all of us. I think it's so important to find places in our life where we genuinely can just give and be a blessing. And so, Rabbi, help us. Tzitsum, it translated, is to contract, to make
contraction,
smaller,
yeah,
and then teruma is to give. Is that the
right,
actual
giving,
word?
yes, yep.
Okay.
Litrom in modern Hebrew is to give. So truma is a
Okay.
gift, a giving. Yep.
So then what is tzedakah? Because I thought tzedakah was the act of giving.
Tzedakah is another. It's like there's giving and there's charity. Tzedakah is the Hebrew word for charity. The difference in the English charity and the Hebrew tzedakah is tzedakah. It comes from the root meaning justice, because
Ah,
in Hebrew tzedakah is a commandment. It's not you do it completely voluntarily. It's also what you like tithing. It's what you should do. So
gotcha.
they're kindred concepts, but not exactly the same. Um,
Yeah, and
but
we have
but
that in our tradition, right? Like our parlance would be, we talk about tithes and
right,
offerings, and our
exactly so.
tithing is kind of the expected giving. That's what we
Right,
kind of we feel like is communally expected,
right.
and then giving is when we feel a special unction and a desire to be in a, so that makes sense for us.
That's right.
Folks, if you're just tuning in tonight, it's awesome to have you here. We are here Thursday night, Bishop and the Rabbi. You've got one job right now. That's to hit the share button, spread this news of a generation of people. By the way, folks, this is happening all over the world. In fact, just today we were online with Eagles Wings Brazil. We've fully opened our offices now in Brazil, and you're going to hear more about that in the days and years ahead. But globally, all over the world, Christians are recapturing this sense of the power and the righteousness of the Jewish roots of our faith, and how we are encouraged and strengthened when we come into that greater understanding, and then the great privilege to walk alongside our Jewish brothers and sisters. And of course, like any other group, there's places of agreement and disagreement. But what we find is that we have far, far, far more places of agreement with our Jewish brothers and sisters. So let's celebrate that. Let's walk together in that. Let's disagree respectfully where we still have places of disagreement, but let's learn from one another. The book of Proverbs says, as iron sharpens iron, so one sharpens another. And so we should come into places of sacred conversation that help us to grow as a community of faith. And we're doing that tonight with one of the great rabbinic lights in this generation. And I don't mean that with flattery. This brother has earned a place of extraordinary respect all around the world, Rabbi David Wolpe, who you can follow at Rabbi Wolpe at Twitter.com and get a hold of his latest book, which is David, the Divided Heart. And Rabbi, you're walking us through, we're in Exodus 25 to 27 tonight, and we're talking about what it means to be a dwelling place for God. And we've talked about God contracting himself, about bringing God intentionally, because God is transcendent, God is ineffable, God is beyond our comprehension.
Yes.
Yet he gives us glimpses into that by these moments, right, where he kind of puts himself within time and space so that we can identify. And then that's found in giving. And Moses has this amazing, the offering of all offerings. Every pastor and rabbi wishes that we would have that moment.
No, we're not Moses. Right. And also, I mean, all of our conversation sort of leads to this. God doesn't say, build me a tabernacle and I'll dwell in it. God says, build me a tabernacle and I'll dwell among you. In other words, the tabernacle is the means by which God comes into people's lives and hearts. So it's not like God's in the tabernacle physically. But we know this when you walk into a church or a synagogue. It's not like God is in that room and God isn't on Wilshire Boulevard, to speak of my sanctuary, for example. But we feel different in this place where we have a sense of God's presence, in part because of what we're doing. In fact, there's I told you one Hasidic story, I'll tell you one more. There was a very famous Hasidic rabbi who was called the Seer of Lublin. And when he was a child, apparently he used to go into the woods. And one day his father pulled him aside and he said, why are you going into the woods every day? And he said, well, I go there to find God. And his father said, oh, that's beautiful, but don't you know that God is the same everywhere? And the boy said, God is, but I'm not. And the same thing is true, that certain places we go, it's not like there's more concentration of God in place X or place Y. But when you, for example, go to Israel and you know that you walk in the footsteps of our ancestors, for a Christian, that you walk in the footsteps of Jesus, for Jews, that we are the place where Israel was first established as a state. I mean, you feel God in a different way, not because God has a passport, but because we do. So
yeah. I mean, there's a reason it's called the Holy Land.
yes.
And there's a sanctity there that is transcendent. All right, Rabbi, you told us there were three primary lessons. Bring us to the third.
So the third one is that it says.
By the way, Rabbi, I'm sorry, but that's very Trinitarian of you. I have to just.
I should have come up with four. So the third that I was thinking about is that it mentions that there's gold inlay and gold outside, and the rabbis of the Talmud say that's because your inside should be like your outside. In other words, the way you behave in the world should be a reflection of who you are. You shouldn't be untrue to yourself, but also the kind of person who you are should find expression in a good way in your behavior in the world. It moves both ways. So it's kind of a rabbinic comment against hypocrisy. Don't pretend to be that which you aren't. Be truthful to yourself. Now, that doesn't mean we all know that you express everything inside of you, right? Because we all know that being with other people means that you have to try to take their sensibilities into account. But it does mean that there should be, that the person that the world sees, all too often we know that the public figure is not the private person. And my father was a rabbi, a wonderful man. And people used to always ask me, what's it like to be the rabbi's son? And I said, and it was true, I said, it's exactly what you would think, because he's the same person at home, and he was, that you see outside, that his inside was like his outside. And I think that that's a beautiful legacy. And And I mean, yes, when you go home, there's a certain ease, but you shouldn't be a different person to your family from the person you are in the world. You should be the same.
And I believe your father and much of his ministerial career was in the Baltimore area. Is that accurate?
Philadelphia.
Oh,
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. I'm sorry.
I grew up
Okay,
in
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. I was born in Harrisburg and I grew up in Philadelphia. And actually, before
Okay.
that, he was in Charleston. So he
Okay.
did the South and the North, but I'm a Philadelphia boy. I still follow the Philadelphia teams.
Okay.
But I've been in Los Angeles for
was
over 30 years, but you don't get rid of that. So
Well, it's beautiful. And, it makes me think of our mutual friend, Mark Gerson, who, of course, our
yeah.
audience knows very well. And I have to tell you, because Mark teaches us every Tuesday, there is no rabbi that he quotes more than you. You are Mark's most.
So let me tell you something, and you can surprise him next time you talk to him.
All right.
Mark Gerson, this is how wonderful a man he is. I told him the story that I grew up in Philadelphia, and the man who owned the Philadelphia 76ers was a member of my father's congregation. His name was Irv Kozlov. Lovely man. And sometimes he would take me, I was such a big fan, to the basketball games. And once Hal Greer, who was an all-star, made a layup and fell on me, and I held him up for a second. And that was like the thrill of my childhood, was that I saved Hal Greer. So Mark somehow found his way to Hal Greer, and before he died, which was about a year ago, he got him to sign a picture of himself saying, "Thank you for saving me, Rabbi." And Mark gave it to me at one of our lunches in New York. So and I treasure that picture. But that's an example. As much as I enjoyed receiving that, I think that's how much Mark enjoyed giving it to me. When you find something special for someone, and you give, so you can mention that to him. I hear you gave Hal Greer's picture.
And Mark is the master, like, memorabilia. Mark is all about Elvis Presley. I mean, he is just an Elvis Presley fan.
I know.
So we took his kids and my kids. We all went. He said, we're going to go on a tour of Graceland. So we went down to Memphis and we did a spiritual pilgrimage to Graceland to see Elvis. It's a whole other story.
And those are the kinds of things that you don't forget. So, yeah.
So, Rabbi, but I want to come back to my point with Mark. Mark, what you're saying right now. So the gold inlay and the gold outlay, right? It speaks of inner consistency and outer consistency. And it reminds me of something that Mark has always said, which is that we have perhaps had a limited understanding of the term integrity, because we oftentimes think of integrity in terms of, correct behavior, being fastidious in details and having, great ethical follow through and all these things. And of course, that is one shade of definition. But Mark has challenged us that integrity also comes from the, integration.
Yes.
Are our lives integrated? Is there a connectivity to all that we are doing, so that what I'm doing here, in the political realm connects to what I'm doing here with my family, connects to what I'm doing in my prayer life, connects to what I'm doing in my giving. I think of that beautiful phrase from the Psalms where God says, I've give me truth in my inward parts. It says, let the inward part. So an integration, integrity as a place of integration. What do you think about that?
I think that goes back to the roots of the Hebrew word shalom. Shalom, which means peace, comes from shalem, which means whole. And to be whole is, nobody's perfectly whole, obviously, because we're human beings, we're flawed. But to be whole means exactly what you were saying, which is that we have that integration. We are a consistent person. You don't walk out of the pulpit when you're done preaching and say, put one over on them. Instead you say, boy, I hope that my message got through because I really mean it. And knowing that you are who you are is, it's first of all a great blessing to have that sense of integrity and wholeness, because then you're living one life as opposed to living multiple lives that
Right.
don't touch each other, which some people do.
Yep.
They have one life at business and one life with their friends and another life with their family. And they're like
Yep.
three circles that barely intersect. But to live one integrated life with people,
Beautiful.
that's shlemut, that's wholeness.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Folks, we are learning tonight from Rabbi David Wolpe. We're studying Tarumah, which is giving. We're taking away three core themes tonight. Tzitzum, which is a God who comes and dwells in our midst, and he manifests himself. He met Moshe as the burning bush. There's all these, Abraham, the three friends that came and announced the news. There's these epiphanies of God. There's these moments where the divine, the transcendent, just comes and we see God. Beautiful Meister used to say, God writes straight. It's just the lines that are crooked. God is writing his story in history, and wherever you are tonight, whatever you're going through, I want to tell you, God is there. God is present. I shared on Sunday from Psalm 16. I have set the Lord before me. He is always at my right hand. And if you will just acknowledge God, you might be in a hospital room. You might be going through a difficult time in your family life. There might be stress from COVID or difficulty financially with jobs being lost. I want to promise us, God is a very present help in time of trouble. And if we acknowledge his presence, we begin to see him make a way for us. And so we've been so encouraged tonight from our friend Rabbi David Wolpe, and I want to encourage you, get a copy of his book, David, The Divided Heart, and his book, Why Faith Matters, and follow him on social media. One of the great teachers of our generation. Rabbi, we're coming into the last few minutes tonight. Maybe just reflect for a moment. What does the conversation that we're having tonight mean to you? You grew up in a rabbinic home. Would your father or grandfather have expected or understood kind of this outpouring of Christian support? How are you processing all of this, and what does this mean, and how can we take this further?
So what I would say is I don't know. My grandfather, I don't know. It's hard because I unfortunately died when my father was young. I didn't know him. My father, I think, would have been surprised and delighted. I think that's really because he had some friends who were pastors, but the level of closeness was nothing like it is today. And the ability, and the support of so much of the Christian community, of which you are the shining exemplar for the state of Israel, I think it would have. I can't express the joy that would have brought to him, because I remember very much. This will just give you an image of who he was. The only time in my life that I remember before my mother got very sick, the first time I ever remember my father crying was when we went to Israel the first time he could go to the Western Wall after 1967. So for him, somebody who loved Israel was, and to think that so many Christians would see it as a place where their faith was being honored and where they could honor our tradition, I think would have meant the world to him. And as you say, the possibility of studying together and learning together is just an extraordinary opportunity. I think I know this sounds ridiculously grandiose, but it's an opportunity for the world. It really is. Here are two traditions that for so long had such contentious and sometimes truly terrible relationships, and to embrace one another and to honor one another. If this isn't God's work, I don't know what is.
Well, Rabbi, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for having the openness of heart, the breadth of spirit to extend your hand and your heart and friendship to us. the horror of the past that you discuss was a very one-sided horror. The atrocities were committed by Christians against the Jewish people. Those of us who are evangelicals, who have a philo-Semitic theology, we can't conceive of those people as actually being Christians. For us, they may have been cultural Christians. They may, but to us, they were never walking in the true sense of what it means. But nevertheless, we have to bear that responsibility, and we do. And that's why we are so committed to righting, the wrongs of the past. And your hand of friendship means the world to us, sir. And I mean that with all sincerity.
And I feel
thank
the same way.
Well, would you consider coming back and teaching us again sometime?
I would be eager to come back. Just tell me when, I'll be here. And by being here, I mean I'll be here, but maybe it'll be a time when I'll be able to be there, which would also be great. Would be even better.
Well, or I'll come there. We'll go live.
Right. God willing, very soon, we will be liberated from our cages and be able to see one another in person again, since after all, the closest image of God you get in this world is another human face. So.
Amen and amen. And beautifully said. Everybody, thank you for tuning in tonight. Rabbi, thank you for spending time with us. Folks, remember, we will see you Sunday morning, 10 a.m. at thetab.org. I'll be preaching. Tune in. We're going to have a wonderful time. Thetab.org, Sunday morning, 10 a.m. And then Tuesdays, Torah Tuesdays at 12. Just go to the link and sign up and be a part. And above all else, keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. God bless you. Good night. God bless you, Rabbi.